702 on 92.7 and 106 FM.
Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and on DSTV channel 856.
7 minutes after 6 p.m., you're tuned in to 702 and Cape Talk. My name is Nogukanya Mtambo. A very good evening to you. It's Friday. Finally, I don't know if it makes any difference anymore to anyone. If it does, great. But I really cannot wait for the weekend. It's much needed. Thank you so much for choosing us this evening. So much to get through. Never, ever enough time. It really feels like the time here really flies. I don't know if it's me or if it's you or if it's because we're having so much fun. I hope it's because we're having so much fun. We're going to kick off the show this evening with a conversation about how businesses can capitalize on social media for a bigger impact with their customers and to drive up revenue. Really, that's the bigger picture. And of course, gone are the days where socials were just for socializing, getting in touch with your family. It's great if you are still using them for that, but there really is big money to be made on social media. And I want to be a part of a conversation where we're getting you and your business to that. So we'll find out how we do that. Are you, out of curiosity, on the market for a car at the moment? And notice how I didn't say a new car, because it turns out there's actually a really big market for used cars as well. So if you've been having a tough time trying to figure out if you should get a used car or a new car because you are on the market for one, we have a motoring expert, Warren Tucker, who will hopefully help make that decision easier for you by answering some of the tough questions and getting to how that decision needs to be made. I mentioned food, I mentioned cars. Can you tell what's missing from that list? It's travel. Of course, we'll also talk about that. All that and more coming up in the show.
Walking this talk together.
Every hour.
Every day. This is 702.
Let's walk the talk.
Like I said, it's Friday. What is it that you plan on getting up to this weekend? I know that a lot of people are starting to travel back to Joburg. Reality is starting to sink in because back to school, back to reality. I know a lot of people also go back to work next week. I think it's the 6th. We resume regular programming for just about a lot of people, the 6th, then I think the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Let us know what it is that you are going to get up to this weekend. Is it the weekend where you start to get yourselves together? You're starting to, whip up the white shirts and the blazers and everything else, getting ready for work. If you are, how are you de-stressing and getting ready for that? Please do let us know what your plans are. 011 883 0702. That's our line that you can call. Alternatively, you are more than welcome to get in touch with us on WhatsApp. Send us a text or a voice note, 072 702 1702. I mentioned that we are going to be talking about how you can unlock the power of social media so that you get success for your business. Peter Groenewald, who's the CEO of Infinity Influencer, joins us now on the line to speak to us about that. Peter, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Nogukanya, and hi to your listeners.
Am I correct to say, and I think this is common knowledge, but social media really has revolutionized not just how we use it to get in touch with our relatives and our long-lost friends across the world, but also how businesses are using it to target, a particular audience and to drive their revenues up. Peter, just speak to me about how social media has changed the way that people do business.
Yeah, it's interesting, but as audiences, advertising has always followed where audiences are. And today a lot of people are spending time on social media.
Yeah.
And if you consider that almost 70 cents out of every advertising dollar is going between Meta, which is your Facebook and Instagram, as well as Google. And then the other rising star is obviously TikTok. It shows you that the advertising money is being shifted into that direction because the audiences are spending so much time there. And then if you consider the technology around AI and audience targeting and retargeting that these platforms offer you, as well as the capability of reporting on success, something, I grew up in an era where when half your advertising is working and half is not working, but you don't know which half is working. I think as the measurability that's been brought into social media advertising is a huge plus for that sector, and it allows everyone to play there because everyone can advertise, and you just need to open your Facebook page or your Instagram page to see how even small brands are advertising to you. And that for me is unbelievable to see, because I think historically with traditional media, it was hard for small business to advertise.
Yeah.
I mean, you possibly had a local regional newspapers, and that was the only option you had. And today, social media is a game changer in my mind.
Is the drive towards social media because there are so many more people that are using social media now, or is it because it's more cost effective for businesses, or can we consider it to be a combination of these two?
It's definitely a combination. I mean, as you can target to very specifically, and it will cost you like 30 rands to reach 1,000 eyeballs on Meta. TikTok similarly. So it is very cost effective. And then if you bring in the AI tools of social media, whereby, say for instance, a restaurant is advertising.
Yeah.
They know which people have shown interest into that ad, who spent more time on that ad, and then they'll reserve them the second and the third time that advertising. So I think all in all, it's very effective. It works, and that's why today they demand so much of the advertising cake in terms of money that's flowing their way.
Yeah. Peter, I think you've mentioned AI tools twice already, and I think maybe I've been thinking about AI the wrong way or going about it the wrong way. In my head, usually when we mention AI and you'll hear, it's great for technology to see it evolving in that direction, but there's also always somewhat of a distrust where AI is involved because of the scams and a whole lot of other issues that have evolved when it comes to AI. But speak to me then about how businesses are using these AI tools that you've mentioned twice already in getting to the correct audiences for their businesses.
Yeah, so I think the platforms like Meta and Google, they've got access to the resources to fine-tune these AI tools. And most of it goes into targeting the right person. So if you're in a market for a mountain bike, it's a new year, you've got on your program, you want to get fit again. The first time you clicked on a mountain bike ad, you've indicated to the platform that you're interested in mountain bikes.
Yes.
They'll then go to all their advertisers of mountain bikes and start serving those ads to you. And you've experienced it yourself. And then what's fascinating is they also start learning when you're not interested in that anymore. So now you've bought a mountain bike. They don't serve you those ads for the next 2 or 3 months. They immediately picked up that you've now bought the item.
Yeah.
And you're no longer clicking on the ads. And as a result, they don't serve you those ads. And I think that's where the AI tools are coming in very conveniently and ultimately driving efficiencies on social media advertising for you. They also know, for instance, me and you might be the kind of people that like a post. We click on a post and we like it. But I also know who's put in their credit card details and bought the item. So when they boost for conversion, they will definitely serve those ads to people that previously bought online. And that for me is the game changer, is the amount of knowledge they've got of their audience in order then to extract most benefit for their advertisers from that specific audience.
Yeah, Peter, that sounds great, obviously, from the business perspective, because they're able to target the correct audiences and obviously it lands quicker. You're able to convert that into sales, of course, if you're getting to the right audience. But on the flip side, there's the issue. I know with Meta specifically, they've gotten into a lot of trouble for doing that and the use of the AI tools and the data privacy issues that arise from that. How do we get around that?
Yeah, I think the platforms, what you'll start seeing is like Google, for instance, for me is fantastic that they give you the option to rather pay them for the content and then they don't serve you ads at all. So I think what you'll start seeing on the platforms is that for a small percentage of people will say, listen, I don't want your advertising.
Yeah.
But I'll rather pay for the service of being connected to my loved ones and my family all across the world. So you'll start seeing those options coming through. I know Google is doing it with great effect, and it's certainly, if you've enjoyed their ad-free environment, it's a game changer. So I think everything comes at a cost. For us, if you don't pay for the platform access, you pay through the advertising that's being served to you. So, and obviously, they understand the data privacy laws, and yeah, you mentioned Meta has been caught out on that, but I'm sure post that they fix it, and those gaps are not there anymore.
Yeah. How do businesses, if there's somebody who's sitting at home now trying to figure out a social media strategy for their business, how do they, when they've got the traffic on their pages and they've got the engagement, they've got people interacting with the posts and the various services that they provide on socials, how do they then convert that traffic into meaningful either sales so that we see the revenue? Because then otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. So my advice to business out there is if you don't have a social media strategy, you should definitely use 2025 to get that, because it's a game changer for your business. Then the second thing is your core business is not to do social media advertising. So go and find someone that can assist you with that. Someone that's got a track record where they've helped other people, that have got existing clients, that I can show you what they've done for other clients. And then work with them.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like all advertising over decades, you can do it wrong. You can buy billboards and your creative on the billboards are wrong, and as a result, the campaign is not working for you. And I think the same in social media. Make sure that you've got someone with the capabilities to help you, so that you can track the leads that's coming in, that you can track the cost of every sale that you've done, and that you can start then say, okay, I've tested it, because the other great thing about social media is you first test it, and if it's working well, then you scale it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you should think about 2025. I haven't used social media. Almost the whole world is accessing social media on a daily basis. If I want to have a piece of the pie, how can someone help me to start deploying my social media strategy around advertising?
Peter, I probably should have
and the big thing for me is the fact that 70 cents out of every advertising dollar in the world is going into social media in one form or other.
Yeah.
You should sit back and say, is my media strategy representing the same investment split? Because it should.
Yeah. I probably should have started with this one then before this question. For the businesses that are interested in, like you mentioned, if you have a business, this should probably be a part of your 2025 agenda. What should that strategy look like? You've already mentioned, where possible, get somebody who's able to, who has the expertise and the know-how about how to go about social media. Speak to me about what else needs to be a part of that strategy for a business that wants to explore the use of social media as part of their advertising tool for the year.
Okay, so what you basically need in all social media strategy is content. And your content sources can be twofold. One, you can, as a brand, create your own content. Or secondly, you can rely on influencers to create content for you. And the influencer category is obviously growing and exploding from a growth perspective, because brands are sitting back and say, it's a platform for humans, and let me allow humans to create the content on my behalf. That's the influencer side. So you'll need content. And then what you need is skills around the distribution of the content to get in front of the right eyeballs. And that's where I feel like if you don't have knowledge of this, is to get someone who can help you in that regard. Because the platforms is very... it's complex, these platforms, to navigate it, etc. And if it's not your core business, get someone to help you. So then to distribute your content to the right eyeballs.
Yeah.
And then the platforms will give you the option. What is your objective? Initially, you start maybe with an awareness campaign that people just see your product. Then you might convert to an engagement campaign. And ultimately, you want to convert to a conversion campaign. Right. So I'm old school. I like to follow the process that's built these platforms, where you start with awareness, then you look at engagement, and ultimately you look for conversion. And then it repeats. On a monthly basis, you repeat this program. And if it works well for you, then as a business owner, it makes sense to say, listen, I want to deploy more money into this channel.
All right. That's Pieter Groenewald, who's the CEO of Infinity Influencer, speaking to us about what your business needs to be doing and what you need to be doing for your business to make sure you're getting the eyeballs, as he says, awareness, engagement, and then conversion. Make sure if you are able to, you're employing the right people to drive the social media strategy for you.
Relax this summer
with podcasts from your favorite shows
on PrimeMediaPlus.com.
It's 22 minutes after 6 p.m. on 702 and Cape Talk. You're still with us this evening. We've gotten one thing out of the way. Now I want to switch our attention to food, right? And I'm already salivating. I'm actually quite hungry just thinking about this. But I want to tell you how we can perhaps switch to eating healthier in 2025. And I know this is a conversation that we have all too often, but it's a conversation that we continuously need to drive down again and again and again and again. And I'm sure it's on your New Year's resolutions. It's on the agenda for the year to eat healthier. But I know that one of the things that a lot of people are struggling with is sticking to those diets and sticking to the plan of eating healthier, the lifestyle rather of eating healthier, because of the cost implications that are involved. Lindiwe Msiza, who is a change strategist and wellness and leadership coach, is going to help us this evening to find ways to make sure that we're able to stick to this healthier lifestyle by finding ways that don't actually break the bank. Lindiwe, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Nogukai, and good evening to all the 702 listeners tonight.
Lindiwe, I said this is something we have to do very often, right? Because people fall out of the habits. You pick up the good habits, then somewhere down the line, because it's so expensive, you have to drop them. That being a costly exercise. Speak to me about some of the underlying factors that actually make it such a costly habit to maintain.
Well, I'll start with the marketing influence. The wellness industry often markets premium products as essential foods. These are mostly your processed foods, your superfoods. They are marketed as if they are the essential foods, yet they are not necessarily essential foods. The second underlying factor is lack of planning in our own homes. We don't necessarily plan our weekly meals or monthly meals. We rely on impulse buying and therefore end up eating convenient foods, which inflate our costs or actually disturb our monthly budgets. The third underlying factor is access inequities. This is really about limited availability of fresh produce, which is affordable in certain areas. And obviously, if this fresh produce is not available, then there is that dependency on processed options. The second underlying factor is societal expectation. Usually, and very often, society often equates health with exclusivity. And I'm speaking about exclusivity because not every one of us can afford a gym membership. Not everyone can afford trendy diets nor superfoods. These pressures can deter individuals from starting their wellness journeys. And this is a time where, honestly, we are suffering from post-holiday spending hangover. December has done a number on our wallets, and January can feel like a financial detox. But this is also a chance for us to reassess, to reset, and realign our spending habits with our personal goals and our family goals. And of course, looking at our budgets with a fine-tooth comb, because it is January time where people would say we're eating cabbage and not meat.
Lindiwe, how then if I've identified that I want to pick up this healthy lifestyle, I want to get healthier for the year, but again, you mentioned the cost of gym, for example, might be expensive, or there's limited availability of fresh produce that's cost effective. How then do I mitigate these expenses?
So I'm going to touch on three things. First, it will be the strategies that I want to introduce to your listeners.
Yeah.
Practical tips for listeners. And then I will end with something that we all know of, which is a very ancient Christian practice.
Please.
So with the first part, which is a strategy that we can all start looking into, it's a framework that I use in my coaching practice, and it's called the WELL framework. Firstly, W stands for work with what you have. Right now, as this interview concludes, walk to your pantry, take a stock of what's in there before you hit the grocery stores tomorrow.
Yeah.
Make certain that you are not duplicating what's already in your pantry. The second part of the WELL is educate yourself. Learn about affordable, nutrient-rich staples like lentils, beans, and seasonal vegetables. And also read the content of the sugar levels and the salt on whatever you're buying that is going into your pantry. The third part of it is the L, which is live within your means. So we all need to start setting budgets to avoid overspending on non-essentials.
Yeah.
And lastly is leverage community resources. Very important for us to start supporting local markets and participate in urban garden initiatives. What I mean by that is it is time for us to remove our grasses, our green grasses, and start planting sidewalk gardens. Gardens that will feed our communities and help us to curb the food insecurity in our country. Now, I will deep dive into the practical tips for the listeners.
Yes.
The first tip is prep and plan your meals. Make it a habit that every weekend, you and your kids or the entire family, you sit around the table, you peel and chop your fruits and vegetables for the entire week. And start thinking about freezing your portions for convenience when you cook. Batch cook your soups, your stews, and your stir fries. The second part is shop smart. Start opting to buy store brands and buy bulk purchases and also seasonal produce. When you buy something that is a produce out of season, the likelihood of that being expensive is very high. The third part in terms of really working on our budget is, I know smokers and alcohol drinkers here are not going to like this, but it's very important that in this month we ditch the alcohol and smoking habits, because these significantly drain our monthly budgets and also they have health implications.
Yeah.
And then find an accountability partner as your fourth strategy. As a coach myself, I do have an accountability partner, a health coach, and her name is Makeni Zonnevold. She's called the coolest granny in town. At 70, she has also written a book called Healthier and Slimmer. I'll talk about that later. And then the fifth part is download a health app on your smartphone. Start tracking your meals. Make sure that whatever meals that you're taking, you are measuring how many carbs you're taking, and the contents of the sugar contents in everything that you are consuming.
Yeah.
And lastly, I would like for people to also start considering that January, with our budgets being low, go back and audit your expenses and eliminate unnecessary costs.
Yeah.
During December, some of your kids were downloading some subscriptions which are currently going to go redundant. Go and cut those costs. So that's very important, and those are the tips. And then the ancient teaching that I want to remind all of us of is called the Daniel fast, which is a practice that is known by most people who are Christians. Usually begins on the 10th of January for most Christians. It's a 21-day fast which focuses on the whole plant-based foods, which eliminate processed items, sugar, animal products, and promotes drinking a lot of water,
Yes.
eating fresh produce, and making sure that you're also mindful, because there's a prayer part that comes into effect. The benefits of the Daniel fast is that it really improves your health, your digestion, and it also boosts your energy. The second part of the second benefit of the Daniel fast is the savings
Very
that comes
briefly,
along
please.
with it. And then the last two is your spiritual renewal and community solutions, which I spoke to about gardening and food security.
Yes.
So these are some of the tips and the strategies that I would like to share with the listeners today.
Yeah, that's Lindiwe Msiza, who is a change strategist as well as a wellness and leadership coach. Remember those tips to educate yourself, work with what you have, live within your means, and leverage your local resources. And that should help put you back on the right track when it comes to your health for the year. It's 6:32 p.m. Let's get your news headlines with Zoleka Kotash.
702 and Cape Talk.
Lives online on primemediaplus.com.
20 minutes to go before 7 p.m. You're still on 702 and Cape Talk this evening. My name is Nogukhanya Mtambo. Thank you for sparing your time to be with us this evening. If you are in the market to buy a car this year, or you're still thinking about it and you're trying to weigh the pros and cons, it can be very overwhelming trying to figure out whether you should go for a new car or a used car. And quite often the answer boils down to the best possible deal that you're able to get for what it is that you're looking for, and of course what it is that you're willing to spend. I'm curious to know what it is that you look for in a car. Is it the specs, the sound? Are you brand conscious? Is it the size because you have to consider the family, or is it a smaller one because you don't have a family? What do you look for when you're getting a car? Let us know. 011 883 0702 or on WhatsApp 072 702 1702. We have Warren Tucker, who's a motoring expert, on the line joining us now, hopefully able to help us unpack how you make that tough decision. Warren, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Warren. How are you?
Awesome, man. Did you have a good start to 2025?
I'm here. I'm alive and well. That's all I can give right now. I hope that's enough. Warren, tell me, how do we figure out what the best value is for our specific needs? If there's somebody right now who's on the market for a car and trying to weigh the pros and cons of whether to go for a new car or a used car, what is it that you need to ask yourself first?
So, look, South Africans tend to buy vehicles a lot of the time based on monthly installment.
Yeah.
They want to buy the vehicle and it needs to suit their pocket for that specific, if they can afford 6,000 Rand a month, they will start looking at advertisers that advertise vehicles for 6,000 Rand a month. And then they will delve from there. Then they'll look at the brand. Then they'll start looking at what does the vehicle come with. But majority of South Africans seem to be buying based on installment. Okay, then you get the other sort of buyer who's brand conscious that will look and say, well, I drove a VW, I'm going to drive another VW because I know the brand, I know what I'm getting. And they will then go and inquire at the dealership and say, well, I'd like to replace my current vehicle. What is the current model or version of this vehicle? And then they will structure a deal accordingly. Okay, then obviously you get your customer that basically money is not an issue. The latest iteration of a Land Rover or Range Rover Sport comes out and they must have it, and they'll go and buy that vehicle. But a lot of the time, people buy a vehicle and they confuse affording the vehicle with actually being able to have the vehicle. Okay, you might be able to afford the monthly installment, but can you put petrol in the car? Can you put diesel in the car? Can you maintain the tires on the vehicle? If the vehicle gets damaged, are you able to afford to pay the insurance on the vehicle or the excess? All those things. So a lot of the time, basically, people just look at, well, the installment 6,000 Rand. My pocket says I can afford 6,000 Rand. I want the vehicle. But there's all the other things that go along with it.
Okay, let's start there. Let's start with the prices. You said there's people that are brand conscious, the people that look at the installment first, and then the people who really don't aren't too strapped for cash and splurge where they want, right? Let's start with the money. For somebody who may be a first-time buyer, the installment is not the only thing you mentioned. There's petrol. So if we're looking at monthly expenses, what should I then be setting money aside for a monthly expense in addition to the installment?
Well, what you must remember is, first off, the vehicle. Most new cars come with a maintenance plan of some sort, maybe to 45,000 or 60,000 Ks, but you will then be responsible for that later. Tires, definitely you're going to be responsible for tires, okay? And then obviously your day-to-day or you need to put petrol into the vehicle. You know, the vehicle doesn't drive on love and fresh air, unfortunately. So you need to put petrol in, and you need to be conscious of what that vehicle costs to fill the tank, and also how much kilometers you're going to get out of the tank. Now, you know, it's nice to go and buy a big, heavy SUV because you've got a big family, but you can only afford to fill it once a month. So what are you doing the rest of the time when you're trying to get around? Or you can maybe afford to fill the tank, but you can't afford to put tires on that big, heavy SUV. So those are all things that you need to keep or be conscious of when purchasing a vehicle. What I say to people is always, I say, okay, if you are buying a vehicle, okay, so in the past, the traditional way of purchasing a vehicle was you would put down either a 10 or 20% deposit, and you would buy the car over 54 months, okay? The banks, obviously, to get more people into cars, they've come out with new innovative ways to get people into vehicles, so they've extended the yearly repayments to 72 months, in some cases 84 months. I don't know how people do that. And then they've also come out with what is a residual, and I like to treat a residual as a deferred deposit. So instead of paying the deposit up front, you pay the deposit at the end of the term. Right? But there's rules to a residual. If you are taking a residual that is 40% of the value of the vehicle, you cannot afford that car. That car is not for you. Okay, I always say to people, your maximum residual should be 20% and nothing more. And even at 20%, you're pushing it. Because what you're actually saying is, if you go 40%, you're saying that 40% of the value of that vehicle, at the end of the term, I'm going to pay that money back in, or I'm going to trade this vehicle in and hopefully just break even. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's why I say, look at your pocket nicely, okay? There's obviously your fantasy car, what you think you want to drive, and then there's what you can actually drive. And, you know, you're very lucky if the two meet, but in most cases they don't. You know, you've got to look at what you realistically what you can afford.
I mentioned a lot of this can get overwhelming, right? If you're walking in as a first-time buyer and they're throwing all of these numbers and these terms that you mentioned, residuals just now. You said if it's 40% or above, you actually just can't afford the car and you probably shouldn't be opting for it. 20% is also a stretch, but you can push for that. When you're walking into a car dealership, how much bargaining power as a consumer do you actually have? Can I say, no, actually, I don't believe 40% is for me. Can we work that residual down? The same with the deposit. If somebody says 10% deposit, can I work that down to 0% and hopefully extend the time longer? How much power do I have walking into a dealership if this is my first time doing it?
Well, at the end of the day, you are purchasing the vehicle. You are the consumer. You are the person that's ultimately going to be paying monthly for that vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay, so definitely you can negotiate the deal and you can tell the salesperson, yes, thank you. I like that you're offering me a 40% residual. I like that you're offering me this low installment, but hang on. I would like to see what the installment would be, right, at 60 months, at a 20% residual. And by the way, I'd like to see all the approvals from the banks, because what happens with when there's an approval that comes through, right, there's something called a dealer incentive commission.
Yes.
Now, the dealer incentive commission is paid to the dealer that's selling you the vehicle as a commission for pushing the vehicle through the bank. Okay? Now, what happens is you are allowed as a customer to ask which bank gave me the best interest rate, not gave you the best dealer incentive commission.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the bank that you can tell the dealer, I want to go with that bank, and I have to go with that bank.
All right. When we are going for dealerships, right? Again, you said it's a profit business, right? Everybody wants to make money at the end of the day. And so, of course, as a dealership, I'm going to make sure that I'm driving whatever's going to give me the biggest profits at the end of the day versus, and probably putting your needs second to that. Possibly, but not always. But speak to me about where we then go. Who are the reputable dealers? If I, again, say I'm going for a used car, how do I know that the dealership that I am approaching is reputable and that I'm not going to be robbed at the end of the day?
Look, ultimately, the picture looks like this, okay? How long is a piece of string, right?
Yeah.
There are mechanisms out there to protect you as the consumer, right? Especially when you purchase a vehicle on hire purchase, meaning that the vehicle is financed through the bank. If you've got an issue, remember, and this is where people miss the boat completely, when you purchase a vehicle from a dealership, the law says, the Consumer Protection Act says very clearly that that dealer must warrant that vehicle for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And must disclose all defects to you, the purchaser, up front. That is in the CPA. When you go and purchase a car from an auction, when you purchase a car from these retail companies, these auction houses that are disguising themselves as retail companies, right? You don't have that fallback. So you then will purchase the vehicle, but you've got no recourse. Oftentimes they will sell you a warranty and they will say, well, here's a warranty. If you have a problem, claim from the warranty. Or if you really come back and have an issue with them, they'll hold up the DECRA report in your face and say, well, but these were the defects and they were disclosed to you and you still purchased the vehicle. When you purchase from a dealer, a car dealer, the dealer most of the time has a deal with the bank, obviously, to finance the vehicle. If you get into a situation where you've taken the car back to the dealer is not honoring any repair, you then get the bank involved. And trust me, when the bank comes and swings their hammer, right, the dealer stands up and listens.
Yeah.
That is your muscle, because ultimately the bank doesn't want to be saddled with a car, right, that you are not happy to pay for, because they're going to then have to repo it and they're going to lose it. They're going to lose money trying to sell the car. Then they're going to have to come after you legally. They don't want all of that.
Yeah.
So we'll rather go to that dealer and say, well, listen, Mr. So-and-so, please make the necessary repairs and sort this thing out, or they'll force the dealer to uplift the vehicle. And what that means is that the dealer needs to then put you back into the position you were in before you purchased that car. So they need to refund all your installments, they need to take their vehicle, they need to reverse the deal, they need to pay the bank back.
Yeah.
And obviously no dealer wants to do that, so they would rather try to help you.
All right. That's Warren Tucker, a motoring expert, telling you what you need to be looking out for if you are on the market for a new or a used car. Be very wary. Read the fine print where you are able to.
Because this journey is better taken together.
Let's walk the talk. 702.
9 minutes to go to the top of the hour. You're still on 702 and Cape Talk. My name is Nogukhanya Mtambo. I know a lot of people, like I said earlier on, are coming back from holidaying throughout the December period. And I know, we're back to reality. But tourism doesn't end in December, doesn't start in December, doesn't end in January. It's an all-year activity, and I think there's a lot that we still can do, particularly for our domestic tourism sector. So now we've got Paula Motini, who's a travel journalist, who's going to be speaking to us about tourism domestically and internationally, the top hot spots that you can still go to throughout the course of the year. Paula, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me on air.
Always a pleasure. Listen, firstly, start me off with whether or not the domestic tourism industry has actually recovered post-COVID-19. Are we seeing the sort of numbers that we want to see, whether it's international visitors coming into the country or our own locals exploring South Africa?
I think it's a bit of both. South Africa has got so much to offer in terms of the international market.
Yeah.
You've got all the game lodges, you've got Cape Town. Those points are never going to change. And I think also what has happened is, with all the trouble that they've had in the Middle East and all the wars that are going on there, the cruising industry has been massively impacted. So a lot of the cruises that would normally go through the channel there are now being diverted and have had to go around Africa because they can't cut through. So we've seen a lot of cruise ships that have actually come through ports of Durban, ports of Cape Town. And unfortunately, with the trouble in Mozambique, we did have a Swan Hellenic that was actually going to do a Maputo all the way to Cape Town, which was going to be incredible. Yeah. But unfortunately, with that trouble, they had to stay that, cancel that. So I think if our neighbours can clean up their act a bit, I think it's going to be a huge help for that. And I know that the trouble in Mozambique affected a lot of holiday makers that normally do head out to neighbouring countries for holiday, especially Mozambique with its beautiful beaches, and a lot of South Africans have got holiday homes there. Yeah. But I think local travel, definitely, and I mean the stats on our toll gates and all the rest, I'm based in Ballito, so we definitely get a lot of the holiday makers, and if I can say that Ballito was, or still is, pumping. I haven't seen this many cars up on the main roads for parking for the beach. It's really been lovely, and we've had ideal weather this December. Yeah. So I really think local travel, first and foremost, is always the best option. But that being said, there are so many special offers available, and depending on where you want to go and the type of traveller that you are, some of the international options are still great if we're looking at out of season. So, we're considering the fact that we're now approaching, coming into a new year. Those that had to work through December that weren't the ones that had the luxury of not working. And I've always maintained, rather work when it's quiet and go off when everybody's busy. And then you get the best of both worlds, because firstly you're traveling out of season, so you're saving there, and you're avoiding all the crowds. Yeah. Where your peak times and over tourism, and I think 2025 is definitely going to be a year for making the right choices when it comes to travel. And I really do hope, and it's something that I'm going to be advocating for fully in 2025, is, the impact that where you go to and what you do when you're there, affects the world as a whole.
Paula, the responsible thing is obviously to start with domestic travel, right? It's only fair that we put South Africa on the map, even for South Africans. So you mentioned Ballito still being a really hot spot. It's a coastal town, stunning coastal town. What are the other big tourist destinations still in South Africa? The N1, N3, always busy around this time of the year. Where should people start thinking about going throughout the rest of the year as well?
I think that, the Drakensberg, we've got a couple of UNESCO sites. So I think the Drakensberg is something absolutely beautiful. You don't have the ocean, but you've got loads of mountains, you've got hiking, you've got trout fishing, you've got all of that. I think Cozy Bay is the best of, it's border of Mozambique, but you're still in South Africa, so you don't have all the issues. And I think it is beautiful, another UNESCO site. Of course, Cape Town is always Cape Town, and people always flock there. But I think also on the outskirts of Cape Town are some beautiful places. You've got Paternoster, you've got Eysterfontein, you've got the whole West Coast, you've got Garden Route. And, if you consider the Garden Route, especially when they had it is a couple of years ago, but, they were so bad, they were affected by COVID, but they were also affected so badly by that, the forest fires that they had. Yeah. And I'm sure that, those down there would greatly appreciate, some business going their way. Kenton also, this December, I think if I look at social media and the things that have been on there, loads of people down there, Plet as well. Where else? I still think obviously Kruger, and that's one thing is when it comes to local accommodation, and especially if you're wanting to go to your game parks, definitely booking in advance. And also making sure that I had a caller that had heard me on another show the other day.
Yeah.
And when it comes to sand parks, sometimes, and this is a great tip for travelers and especially for local travel, is if you can't get hold of the central reservations, because I know sometimes they can be bombarded. So if you can't get hold of central res, try Googling the lodge or the camp or the park that you're going to directly, instead of trying to get through central res. That was somebody that I helped, one of the listeners, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, which is really good advice.
Paula, tell me, for somebody who's trying, sorry to cut in there, but for somebody who's trying to figure out where to go, I mean, you've mentioned some beautiful spots to consider for the rest of the year, but is just a little wary about the admin that comes with it and the costs with it. There's travel agencies, obviously, that are also able to step in and be the middleman between you and these destinations. How do we work around that, and where do we find these, again, the reputable ones, so we're not robbed? Because we've heard a lot of horror stories about people who spent all of their hard-earned cash paying travel agencies, but at the end of the day, there's actually no travel at all.
Yes, I think it is very, and there was those people down in Cape Town with the whole Thailand story, and there has been a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, you need to deal, when you're looking at reputable, they need to be either IATA registered, they need to be an ASATA agency, or they need to be affiliated with some form of consortium. I think there's a lot of independent agents. I'm one of them, so I write and and I publish, but I also have my foot in the game with regards to travel, and it's looking at those reputable agencies. So whether you're going for one of the bigger groups, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the names, but Flight Centres. Your independent agents have associations. So if you have got that personal connection, and I think it is all about finding that personal connection. Your travel agent is, people don't go to just any hairdresser for a haircut.
Yeah.
Or you've got your nail lady, you've got your hair salon, you've got all of this. And when it comes to travel, it's exactly the same. It's about relationship, it's about developing trust, and it's about knowing who their backing partners are. So when you're dealing with an agency, the first thing that you're going to ask is, are you associated to any bigger groups? If so, that's first and foremost. Otherwise, if they aren't and they are 100% independent, are they registered with the ASATA, which is the Association of South African Travel Agents, or IATA registered? And that is a global recognition, because if you've got an IATA license, you have so many checks and balances in place with regards to deposits and things like that they require from you. So if you are an IATA agency, definitely. First to avoid is online booking platforms that aren't associated with anything, because those are the ones that are. And I know that there's a site on Facebook that I get a lot of calls about, where they got these great deals. I mean, you could probably go to, what they're advertising is going to Turkey cheaper than it would cost you to go to Cape Town from Johannesburg.
Yeah. All right. That's Paula Martini, who is a travel author. I hope that advice was useful for you to figure out where you need to go during the course of the year. If you are looking to take a mid-year break, or you're starting to plan for even the end of 2025, even though we just started 2025. It's a minute after 7 p.m. Let's get the latest in your Eyewitness News.